And on paper, it looked like I was failing. Because why would you leave this security? I cried in the bathroom, the ugly cry, not the one tear. It was an ugly cry. I did it anyway.
It's easy to be grateful for what we have and the good things, but it's hard to actually understand how the bad things have contributed to helping us get to where we are today, for better, for worse.
If it scares me a little bit, I lean into it a lot.
Oh my God, that's so powerful.
I was in that stage of burnout.
Is it fair to say that gratitude kills fear? What's up, folks? Welcome to another episode of Mork Unfiltered. No fluff, just real conversations with bold leaders doing meaningful stuff. I'm Patrick Mork, your host, executive coach, truth teller, 3-time CMO, founder, and motivational speaker. So let's talk about our next guest. Today's guest is living proof that confidence is built, not born. Tara LaFon Gooch is a TEDx speaker, best-selling author, CEO of a personal branding agency, and the host of the Grasp Confidence podcast. She's also the creator of the Grasp Method, a transformative framework that helps people build confidence from the inside out. Once afraid to speak up and raised in poverty, Tara now teaches others how to find their own voice and lead with bold, purpose-driven confidence. Her latest book, released in October, Talk Your Way to the Top, is a guide for anyone ready to stop shrinking and start standing out. Welcome to the podcast, Tara. It's so awesome to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Patrick.
So let's talk a little bit about purpose, right? Because this is something that, comes out a lot in your work, in your books, in your podcast. You and I have talked about it many times as well. When you think about your journey, right? And I remember reading this, the first couple of chapters of Grasp Confidence. It's like so powerful. Take us back. I mean, what was a little bit the defining moment for you, which really started your transformation and helped you kind of like find your calling?
Oh, wow. How far do you want me to go back? That's always the question, right? Should I go back to my corporate burnout and leaning into entrepreneurship, or what do you think?
What was that pivotal moment for you where you just mentally kind of thought, I've had enough and I have to kind of like find my way forward out of it?
I love that. Well, like you said in my intro, I'm the youngest of 5 kids, raised by a single mother. I kind of grew up not feeling like I was an individual. I always felt one of, right? Not one, but one of. And I didn't really know, much like a lot of kids growing up, if I had a purpose, what my purpose was, what my calling was. So I went, the route most people do. I went to school, got an MBA, and I thought successful people worked in corporate. And all I wanted to do was just be successful in life. I wanted the opposite of what I had when I was growing up. So I did what I thought was the best route for me, which was going into corporate. I worked in a variety of different companies and worked my way up. I was started as more of a customer service oriented type of role, worked my way up to corporate sales director, reported to the CMO, lots of different roles like that. And I just realized, as I was kind of fizzling out, do I have a purpose? What does that vision look like? And I created my very first vision board. It looked very similar to maybe something you made in middle school, right? It was a poster board. I went to Walmart, got the, ingredients for the vision board, the poster board, and all of these things, and just started cutting out pictures of what I wanted or what I thought would be interesting for me to pursue. I had never done this before. I actually had to look on Google how to make a vision board. That's literally how little experience I had with this. And the very first picture in the middle of the board was a lady speaking in front of an audience of people. Now, at this time, I was really lacking confidence, and public speaking was one of my biggest fears. I was always good one-on-one, but even on a Zoom call, I couldn't bear to do it. I would almost rather crawl into a hole and die, right? So I put public speaking right in the middle. And even though I was afraid of it and wasn't sure why it resonated with me, it was something that I just tried to lean into a little bit. And then from there, I dropped out of corporate. So I'm a corporate dropout. I left with nothing. And I like to tell people that too, because if you leave with something, you're already 10 steps ahead of me and where I started from, because I think that's important. So I had a company car, I had a company computer, I had a company cell phone. I left with all that behind, salary, insurance, all of that. And I started borrowing my mom's car, right? In my late 30s. And on paper, it looked like I was failing. Because why would you leave this security, this safety net? But I knew something bigger was ahead of me. I just didn't know what it was. And that purpose started to come unveiled after I left corporate and I was in that stage of burnout, not really sure what my next move was. And I started writing my next book, or my first book, pardon me, How to Grasp Confidence and Own Your Power. And it was just a delivery of intuition and kind of divine inspiration that allowed me to pin these thoughts and write this story. And that led to speaking. And all of these things started to come into fruition based on that vision board that I did a few months earlier when I was still in corporate. I think by the time I had put my 2 weeks notice in.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Before you continue, just for the sake of the audience, for people who don't know, can you explain to us very simply what is a vision board? What actually is that, and what's the process of going about making one? Because I think I get this feeling that so many people are lost today, and so many people have this question and this feeling that they're like, man, I know I should be doing something different. What I'm doing is like, it doesn't feel right. It's not working for me, but they don't even know where to start on how to figure out their purpose. So what's a vision board, and where did that idea come from?
I love that. I don't know where the idea originally came from or how I heard about it, but what I started doing was thinking about what really motivates me. And it wasn't corporate anymore. It wasn't sales. All of that started to feel empty. And I started to feel like, all right, if this feels empty, but this is what people say is successful, well, what does success actually look like for me? And I started to realize that there's not one dimensional version of success. I had never thought about it that way before, right? Because online on social media, when we hear the word success, we think of generally one dimension of success. We think
That's so
of,
true.
right? Maybe a high
Yeah.
salary, maybe it's a title, maybe it's a position, maybe it's how many people report under you or the big deals you had. Well, none of that started to care. I started to not care about it anymore.
Yeah.
So I started to realize, like, what does that actually look like for me? And it wasn't a Lamborghini. It wasn't a title. I didn't even care about that stuff anymore. What I cared about was helping people and changing people's lives. And I started to think about, well, I also have a family. I want a holistic approach to life. I don't want this one dimensional, because for me, success means nothing if I didn't have my family involved in it. Success also didn't mean anything if I didn't have health, and if I didn't have spiritual wisdom, and if I didn't have a depth of purpose. So when I started to think about that, and basically these values of what that really meant to me, did the vision start to come to the forefront of my mind. And I think this is important because I think we want the vision first. But in order to us to really see the vision clearly, we have to do some foundational work to understand, what do we really want? And for me, I wanted a holistic approach to life, and it wasn't the glitter. It wasn't what everybody tells you is important. It was what I knew I valued. And one of my core values is freedom. So if your core value is freedom, chances are you're not going to be happy in a corporate box, in a construct, right?
Right,
So
exactly.
once
So,
I identified that, it was kind of like, okay, now I need to pursue this. And it made
okay.
it so much clearer. Yeah.
Interesting. So if I'm understanding you correctly, you kind of came to the conclusion that your definition of success was not in alignment with the definition of success that maybe we have as a society, right? All of a sudden you started to explore and realize that there was something more that you needed from success, and that your current corporate life was not giving you that, right? Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely. It's a
Okay.
definite.
And so that's kind of like that led a little bit to this need to do the vision board. And so in your words, what's a vision board? Like, what does that look like? How do you build one?
A vision board is something that you look at every day that reminds you of your vision, of your future, of the things that you want in your life. And you can make it very tangible for yourself. So this is something that's like a constant recall to remind you, because we get really distracted in life, right? It's so easy to get distracted with, we're inundated with information. Again, we're told all the time of what's good for us, but again, it's what you want. So I even did it one step further, because we look at our phones all day long, right? I took my vision board and put it on my lock screen on my phone. So now before every time I pick up my phone, I see my vision. And again, this is a holistic approach to life. So there's certain things in there that are my immediate goals. So my goal is to become a published author under a major publishing house. So I have their logo, right, on my vision board. So I see it constantly. And then I have a picture of me speaking in front of audiences, a picture of me helping people and changing lives, a picture, literally a snapshot of how much money I want to see in my bank account, literally a snapshot of that in numbers, so that I see this constantly and remind myself that these are not impossible goals. And then there's also a picture of me meditating, deepening my spirituality, a picture of me with my family. So when you have this constant visual reminder of what you want, all of a sudden things start to appear that you may not have recognized if you didn't have this visual reminder. So it's interesting. People started to appear that were book agents or marketers at Penguin or editors from Penguin. All of a sudden, they started to connect with me. Why was that? Well, I was attracting based on what I already proclaimed as a declaration of what I wanted.
So it's this idea of manifesting, right? It's like when we create a board like that and we look at it every day and we, of course, take meaningful action towards it, right? It's like we create this energy and things begin to actually happen in our lives. Is that kind of a fair interpretation?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. This is neuroscience, and it's been proven. So it's not woo woo. I think a lot of people still think when they hear these things that it's not scientific, but it really is. It is scientific. And I believe that opportunities are abundant. I believe that we're constantly being presented with opportunities, but we sometimes have blinders on and we don't see the opportunities. Maybe it's because we're not reminded enough about what we want ourselves, or don't have a clarity, or because we're not taking action, or because there's a type of misalignment or something. So for me, it's very important to take action once you have that vision.
Right. So the vision board can be, because it sounds like in your case, it's a virtual vision board. It's something that you created using PowerPoint or using Canva or using Google Slides or something. So you go into like one of these applications, you think about, find a bunch of images that are a representation of what you want in your life. You put them in the slide or the Canva or whatever, and then you have that as a lock screen on your phone. You have that as a desktop wallpaper or something like that. And so you see it all the time. Right. Yep. And then, of course, you got to align your actions and your goals with that vision board, right? You can't just have it there and just, pretend that everything is just magically going to happen. You got to work towards it. Right?
That's right.
Interesting. Yeah, because I thought of vision boards as well. I've seen people make vision boards that are actually physical. I've seen people like they got like a, cardboard panel from a box, something that was delivered from Amazon, and they will like tack images on this. And then they'll have it in their home office, like right in front of their desk, right? In my case, I remember when I was in Chile running this startup and things were so hard and I was struggling so much and just things were not going well. And it was at that point that I decided to move back to the United States. And I created this vision board on my wall where I had images of Miami. And every single day I would sit down at my desk and I had the pictures of the beach and the pictures of beautiful apartments. And I was like, I'm moving back to Miami. I'm going to live on the beach. And guess what? Now I live on the beach in Miami. So yeah, it's interesting how things start to happen when you visualize these things, right? That's fascinating. That's fascinating. And so, has your vision, when you think of the vision board and how far you've come, because again, your story, and obviously for people who don't know, is it fair to say you grew up in poverty? Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's important to, again, in a world where we see the highlight reel, I think it's important to share where we came from. Again, youngest of five, and there were many times growing up where we were living in poverty, but also sometimes below the poverty line, right? So I think that's important to share, because if you don't see the whole story and you only see where somebody is now, it gives you a false perception of that person, and you think a goal is intangible for you. So really, my story, if anything, if you get one nugget of information out of this, it's that if somebody else did it, you can do it too. Nothing is impossible.
Yeah, that's where your story most struck me, right? Because I think, you, especially in this country, you do read stories all the time of people who, are poor and they make it, right? To me, as somebody who follows sports, one of the best examples is, LeBron James and Jimmy Butler from the Miami Heat. Well, now he now plays for the Golden State Warriors. And that's awesome because I'm a Warriors fan. Go Dubs. But, it's like what you read about these stories, but when you actually meet a person, that was what so impressed me when I met you, is honestly, Tara, I had never met somebody who had actually done it. Like that when I remember reading your book and reading the part in your childhood where your mom leaves your dad, and you guys are fleeing the house, and you're literally fleeing the house and never looking back. And it was like a profound moment for you. And I felt like I was like reading a movie, and I was like, my God, I know this woman. It's amazing that she was living in poverty, had all these issues, was with a mom who didn't know what she was going to do, poor. And then, you end up writing multiple books, and you do a TED Talk, and you have your own agency now. And I think it's fair to say that for a lot of women, especially a lot of single moms, you are an inspiration. So, I mean, for me, I think it's a really cool story that you were able to pull that off, right? And get to where you are. And on top of that, what I love about you is, you are just like an incredibly grounded person. And one of the things that always amazes me is that you're always giving, right? Tell us a little bit about, some people are wired that way. But tell us a little bit about why is it important for you, and how has that become part of who you are in your business to be constantly giving to others? Where does that come from, and what's the result of living a life where you're always serving other people?
Giving is one of the most passionate topics I have. So I could probably have a whole podcast dedicated to this, but for everyone's sake, I'll try to make it concise.
Okay.
And you say it well, right? You say we give to get. So I think this is really important. And I didn't always have this mindset. So my mindset used to be, who can I get from today? Right? Because when you're in a state of scarcity, when you're in a state of lack, you don't think abundantly, you think survival.
Right.
So the opposite of survival thinking is abundance. Well, how do you get to that abundant state? And one of the ways is to give. It's really hard to explain to somebody who's stuck in that state of survival that they need to give, because they think, well, what can I possibly give to someone else? But when you give, you're inherently abundant, and you recognize, right, that someone else has less than you. And when you start to do this more and more and more, you start to realize actually how much you have. Right. So my state used to be, who can I get from today?
Yeah.
And it didn't serve me or others.
And that's where most people live.
That's where most people live. They live in a state of what can I get from someone? I challenge anybody listening to this to flip the narrative and to say, who do I get to give to?
Such a good point.
I make it a personal responsibility to give in quality to at least one person every single day of the year. And if I can do it more, I do it more. I go out of my way to give to people. And the analogy that I like to say is my goal at the end of every day is to leave a trail of plus signs behind me. Very simple. It's a posture of increase. My goal is that every person that interacts with me in life or business to have an increase just by being in my radius, just by being interacting with me. And if I can do that, guess what? You'll have no shortage of. You'll have no shortage of customers. You'll have no shortage of opportunities. You'll have no shortage of abundance. So, yes, give to get and do it as much as you possibly can and watch it all come back to you tenfold. I'm a huge believer in.
And for folks who, because I think intuitively a lot of people, their default is to think of giving as giving money. That's just a lot of the way, oh, yeah, okay, I'll make a donation or I'll give the homeless person $5 or whatever. Can you expand on that? I mean, what are other ways people can give?
Absolutely. You can give value, you can give time, you can give advice. And this is kind of how I started my giving journey. When I was at a really rock bottom point after I left my corporate career, I thought I had no purpose. And I was really desperate. And the words that I heard after I asked, what even is my purpose, were these: your life has meaning, but you need to give more. I didn't even know. I'm like, give what? Right? Give what? I thought it was a vague instruction. Like, give what? Right? But it's purposely simple. It doesn't have to be a giving of money. It can be a giving of a time exchange. When you think of someone, and I challenge anybody listening to this right now, I'm sure you've thought of at least one person today. Call them. Call them. There's a reason why you felt a connection to that person. Call them. I've texted you before, haven't I, Patrick? And I've said, I was just thinking about you.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Maybe I have a post and I tag you in a post. I'm like, I just thought this might resonate with you because I was thinking about you. It's an honest, authentic way to connect with a human being. And I think there's no shortage of this in this world. We can do this on multiples every single day and make the world a better place every single day, not just for ourselves, but for everyone we touch.
You're absolutely right. It's crazy because we live in a society where, especially now with this whole AI thing going on and everybody's talking about AI and technology is changing so fast and we're all scrambling to keep up with it. The thing that I most noticed when I left Chile and moved back to the United States is it shocked me how self-absorbed people in this country are, how focused they are on just like money and the next car and the next house and the next paycheck and the next promotion. And people would call me to sell me stuff on Sundays or Saturdays. And I'd be like, dude, it's the weekend. I don't want a sales call on a weekend. And it's like, this is one of the few countries in the world where you have that. And there's a lot of things I admire about the United States. But, the latest data that I saw showed that 22% of Americans are somehow clinically depressed. The global average is 6%. That tells you that we're fundamentally doing something very wrong here, right? We're like 36th, I think, now on the global happiness index, which is published every year by the United Nations. And so as much as we like to say, wow, we're the world's like largest superpower and we have the highest GDP per capita and all these other BS metrics, so many people are unhappy that you end up asking yourself, well, what's the point? And I was coaching an executive who worked in advertising, who worked in the ad business for a long time, and he had worked with me at Google when I was there. And he hired me to coach him because he was like, I'm stuck. I need to get out of this agency thing. It's just killing me. I need to find a way out. And he's like, help me figure out my purpose and help me figure out a next step. And we worked together for like about 4 months. And, as part of the process, one of the things that I was coaching him on is networking, right? I was like, look, if you want to change jobs or change careers, you got to get out there. You can't just like sit behind your computer all day and send, LinkedIn messages and connect with people and go to, and go to virtual conferences and be on Indeed. And so he started networking, and then, after a couple of weeks of networking, nothing was happening. And I was like, well, tell me your process. And it was like, well, I called up this guy and I, had coffee with him and I started asking him, were there any roles available or, what he thought I could do. And I'm like, did you notice something? I'm like, who are you focused on? And he was like, well, I was focused on myself. And I challenged him and I said, well, what might be possible if you focused on helping him instead of helping yourself? And he's like, well, then I'm not going to get anything out of it. And how am I going to figure out my own stuff? And I was like, just try it. Try and figure out what the other person's need is and how you can help them. And yes. I call it helpworking as opposed to networking. And he started to do it. And over the next couple of weeks, the tone of his conversations completely changed. And people that he was meeting for coffee or for lunch started to help him. And it was because he flipped the script, right? So when we proactively go out and we help others, like you do this all the time with me, you're like constantly connecting me with people. Hey, you should be on this person's podcast. I think I was talking with, who was I talking with the other day? Doug or somebody? Was it Doug? Yeah. So I was talking with Doug yesterday. We had a great conversation. I'm going to be on his podcast. And that, of course, came through you. And you're always connecting me with people, right? And it's kind of like, I think people forget that when we're helping others, we're actually helping ourselves, because, the act of giving time or money or attention or a warm connection makes us feel good. And in an era where we're so stressed out and anxious, helping others, I think, is actually part of the solution to reducing our stress and feeling better about ourselves.
Absolutely. And, in a world where we're so focused on strategy and we're so focused on other things, it's not necessarily that this is a part of your quote unquote strategy that you should use. However, it should come from a place of high intention of
Yes.
loving other people.
Right.
But it does work wonders if you do incorporate this into your business practices as well, because when you give to other people so much value, it will, of course, be reciprocated to you. And for me, it's a very faith-driven approach as well.
Yeah.
When I look at the attributes of the creator, I think of someone who gave first, right? He created life. So he brought all things into existence. Well, that's give first. But then we know science has confirmed that, space is expanding. It's expanding in a rapid rate. Life is constantly being created and more things. So we give often, right? And then the first and foremost is that we give it from a place of love, of not expecting anything back in return. Yep. Because, when you operate like that, it just becomes a part of who you are.
Very true.
And it's second nature for you, right? And then all the sudden it naturally becomes part of your business practice, and you operate at this high level energy of just abundance and giving, and there's no end to what will come back to you. No end.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think you can't give from a place of expecting something in return. I think that's the mistake a lot of people make, right? It's the whole reciprocity principle. It's the fact that some people will be manipulative about it. Like they will consciously give because they'll expect something in return. I found that, when you're absolutely right. And it's harder to do that, right? If you give and have zero expectations, that is really kind of what it's all about. But one of the things that I wanted to touch on there, which you mentioned, tell us more, about what does faith mean for you? Because, as you know, I'm a keynote speaker like you, and I talk a lot about resilience in my keynotes. And one of the pillars that I talk about is this idea of faith. But faith means different things for different people, right? Some people are religious, some people are not. What does faith mean to you, and why have you incorporated and made it such a central part of how you?
Faith is everything to me. It's hard to put it in one concise sentence, but it's central to just who I am. Again, it's one of my top core values. Without faith, none of this would be possible. None of it. In order for you to create something, you have to have faith that it'll eventually come to form. If you don't have faith, you'll stop. and you won't carry out the mission, right? So if you're starting a book, if you don't have faith that you're going to finish, you'll give up day one, I promise you. If you're starting a business and you don't have faith that there's a need for this in the market or that people will find the value in it and support your business, you won't start your business. So faith is absolutely critical to success because it helps create sustainable, aligned, and intentional action that complements the fruition of whatever thing you're trying to do. So faith is a continual thing that I think you have a relationship with and continue to deepen over time. And if you start with the faith as small as a mustard seed, that's all you need. But you do need to operate at a space of understanding that just because I don't see something today doesn't mean it's impossible. And the faith helps propel you into continuing that sustained action.
Right.
And it's just so crucial and important. People often ask me, how do you have such bold faith? How do you have such bold faith? Well, it's a multiple of it. So you can start again with a baseline of something, but as you see these things come into your life, you can't ignore that if it wasn't without that faith, if it wasn't without that higher power, that these things wouldn't have come into fruition. And I mean, I can truly attest to anybody listening that, doubt is normal. It's a part of the human condition.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying you'll never have doubt again, but what I'm saying is when you have faith, it helps turn the mute button down on it.
Right. Right. But does it have to be religious? Because like some people listening, and like I was one of those people. For 40 years, I never set foot into a church. I didn't consider myself an atheist. I considered myself spiritual and agnostic.
Mm-hmm.
And it was weird. Like, when my wife left me back in, 2015, I started to meditate and I was desperately looking for something greater. And also I was trying to find a practice that would calm me down, take down the stress, the cortisol levels, and clear my mind, which meditation did. But in your experience, I mean, there's different kind of faiths, right? For some people, faith is just this deep-seated belief and hope in what they're doing, right? And the reason why they're doing this. For some people, it's spiritual. For some people, it's religious. How would you define faith? What does having faith mean?
Faith is, and I talk a lot about confidence, right? So if we're talking about, what is our core message, I realized that in order for me to develop confidence, I needed to build it on a foundation of gratitude, right? So I write that in my book, and on my TEDx talk, I talk about the 3 foundational layers of gratitude. When I started practicing gratitude, I started deepening my faith. It wasn't necessarily a religion. It wasn't any particular, faith-based avenue that I was pursuing. I was pursuing a relationship with gratitude. That gratitude led to other things, right? It led to a deepening of faith in, more of a religious sense. But I think, what does faith mean to me? It means a continuation of acknowledging the thankfulness for what's in your life and having an unshakable confidence of what's to come.
Right.
That's faith. That's faith. And this is why gratitude was such an important part of my journey, and why I encourage anybody listening to this, regardless of what religion you are, if you're a religious person or not, to really examine the role gratitude has in your life. Because for a lot of folks, it's something that they do. It's a check the box. Okay, I've done my gratitude journal for the day. It's not about that. It's about having gratitude for the good, the bad, the in-between, and everything, the entire journey of it. I can look back in my past and have immense gratitude for it, because if I didn't have those things happen, I wouldn't be the person I am today. I wouldn't have a story that inspires people.
So true.
I wouldn't be able to reach the minds and hearts of others.
So true.
So, the faith just comes with a relationship of gratitude, what's been, what's now, and what's yet to become. And again, the unshakable confidence that what you want and need, the best thing for you, is already on its way to being delivered to you. I think that's so key.
That's huge, because I think you said something that I think was very important that, I want to make sure that, all our listeners pay attention to, which is, gratitude is not just being thankful for the good things in your life. It's just being thankful for everything. And it's interesting that you say that, because that's a different perspective, right? Most people be like, oh, I'm thankful for my health, and I'm thankful I have a nice roof over my head, and I'm thankful I have a lot of money, and I'm thankful I'm a member of this club. But you touch on something deeper, which I think is super important, which is that basically Steve Jobs once said this, right? You can't connect the dots going backwards. Well, you could actually, no, he said you can only connect the dots going backwards. You can't look at the future. You don't know how what you're going through right now is going to influence your future. But when you look back on it, 10 years from now, it'll all make sense. And so when I hear you talk, I hear something very unusual, which is a gratitude for how tough it was for you and your mom and the rest of your family when you fled your dad. How tough it was when you made a conscious, very bold decision to leave a perfectly safe, cushy corporate job with all the benefits and jump into the unknown, right? As hard as those things were, those things made you into the person that you are today, and you are therefore grateful for them. And that's huge, because people, it's easy to be grateful for what we have and the good things, but it's hard to actually understand how the bad things have contributed to helping us get to where we are today, for better, for worse, which leads me to the other thing that's very interesting. And again, it's funny because like the way you talk and your experience, it's so intertwined with like a lot of the work that I do and the speaking that I do. One of the things I talk about a lot when I talk about becoming unstoppable and I talk about resilience is this idea of doing hard things. Tell us about that, because obviously you have done your share of hard things, right? When I look at your decision to leave corporate, this is something that probably so many people dream of every freaking day. Not that there's anything wrong with working in corporate. There's nothing wrong with working in a large organization. Some people thrive and love that, and that's cool. I respect that. I was not one of them. But when you have to make a very hard decision and do something that would terrify most people, like leave that kind of an environment and all the safety that it provides, how do you actually make that happen?
Oh, it's such an important thing, right? And again, you have to have a belief in yourself. And, for me, that again, the gratitude for the hard challenges, we know this is a thing, that growth doesn't happen in our comfort zone. It doesn't.
Exactly. So true.
And this is why I try to do things outside of my comfort zone all the time. All the time. And if it scares me a little bit, I lean into it a lot.
Right. And you're doing the right thing.
I know I'm doing the right thing, because
Right.
I know the only way I can actually grow is by pursuing things that scare me. It doesn't mean I want to do it. It doesn't mean I'm always excited about it, right? I'll be real and honest and human. But what it does mean is I know that I'm afraid of it for a reason. Public speaking was example one. I was terrified of it. The moment I went on stage and delivered my very first keynote, before I went on stage, first of all, I cried in the bathroom. Again, I will be honest.
I remember that. That's in your book.
I mean, I'm real, right? I am honest, 100% honest. I cried in the bathroom, the ugly cry, not the one tear. It was an ugly cry. I cried in the bathroom. Yes, yes. But you know what? They called me on stage and I did it anyway. I just jumped. And I'm really
I saw
glad
your TED Talk. It was cool. It was awesome.
I was a mess before that too, And it's like you just do it. Before I wrote my book, I was terrified. I'm writing all of these personal stories. I was terrified. Are people going to think less of me or this and that? Oh, well, you do it anyway, because it was outside of my comfort zone. And you know what? If I wouldn't have done it, it wouldn't have become an international best-selling book. It wouldn't have led to a TEDx talk. It wouldn't have led to my podcast, these things happen for a reason. And we can't see the end game of anything we're doing. We can't see. I know we want to, but it's impossible to see the finish line, quote unquote. But little did I know that when I stepped on stage for the first time, that I would start writing a book just 2 months later, that I would have landed a TED Talk just 6 months after that, and did this and this and this. I didn't see the finish line, but I believe that I had a message that would impact people and change lives. So I did it, even though it was outside of my comfort zone.
And it's fascinating, right? Because it's kind of like, I remember, in my book, I talk about doing a century ride in one of the chapters. And, I was 47 at the time, so I was not a spring chicken. But I remember that was physically one of the hardest things that I've done. And I was like 8 hours and something in the saddle. And I think I arrived last, and it was like scorching hot sun in California. And it was weird because I trained for like over 2 years, I think, to do that. And then the day of the race, my cycling partner was sick. No, he was traveling, so he couldn't make it. So I had to do the race on my own. And it was 100 miles and 10,000 feet of climbing in like the hills and mountains of Northern California. And I got to a point where I was like throwing up all over the handlebars. I was exhausted. It was like the fifth rest stop. It was like almost starting to get dark. Like the organizers are packing up the cones and everything. They're like, do you want a lift to the finish line? I'm like, no, I'm gonna finish. But the funny thing was that I was on a high for like 6 months after that. I thought I was invincible after doing that ride. It didn't matter the fact that I came in last. What mattered was I set myself this audacious, really hard goal. It was really hard, really uncomfortable. And yet it propelled me to be able to do other things, right? And so I think when I listen to you talk and that the shifts and the changes that you've made and how hard it's been, I see kind of like a kindred spirit from that perspective. One of the things I'm very curious, because you talk a lot about gratitude, right? What's the state of mind that you feel when you're in a state of gratitude like that? And how much does being grateful affect or lessen the fear that comes from doing hard things?
I love this question. So I recently delivered a keynote about gratitude, and the analogy I used, I had a slide on the screen, and it was a brain with mumble jumbles, right? Just everywhere, kind of looks like spaghetti. That's the state of our brain when we're in an anxious state. When we're in a state of anxiety, we can't, again, think abundantly. We can't think in gratitude. It's just survival, right? When you're in a state of gratitude, it's like a continual, beautiful loop. Everything's neat, everything's organized, everything's as functioning as it should, right? You're able to think creatively, you're able to think abundantly, you're able to get out of that survival state. So, gratitude is very much, I call it my ninja mindset move. It doesn't matter.
Nice. I like that.
What happens to me or whatever in my day, I find something I'm grateful for about it. So it, again, doesn't matter. If somebody cancels an appointment on me, my old self would say, oh, right, and be anxious.
What's wrong with this Patrick guy canceling his appointment on me?
What's wrong with this Patrick? Yeah, Patrick. And, it would give me ruminating thoughts, and I would have anxiety. And it was almost impossible, really, to think creatively. So when you're in a state of gratitude, when your mindset is in a state of gratitude, it opens the door for creative thinking, abundance, and again, this ninja mindset move that I have. Regardless of what happens, I find the gratitude. And it propels me to not get trapped in those states of anxiety and depression, because that used to be my life. I was once diagnosed with major depressive disorder and anxiety when I was in my corporate role. And I wasn't sure how to get out of those situations until I really developed a relationship with gratitude. It allowed me to completely alter my life. And now I teach gratitude practices to others, and it changes their lives. And it's a virtuous cycle that just keeps giving.
That's amazing, because if I hear you speak and if I interpret you correctly, is it fair to say that gratitude kills fear?
Percent. I'm not
Oh my
afraid of
God,
anything.
that's so powerful. That's so
There's
powerful
no
because
fear.
sorry, go ahead.
There's no fear. It can't exist in the same space. It can exist in the same space. So again, my challenge to anybody who's listening, if you're fearful, if you're doubtful, you're not in a state of gratitude. You have to flip the script so that you can do the big things, right? And this is why I'm passionate about talking about the three foundational layers of gratitude. Again, not just be thankful for what we have, but thankful for the past, how that shaped you, thankful for the present and the journey that it's brought you to, but also thankful and grateful for the future that you have yet to see.
So true.
Because if you can't see it, you can't become it. And gratitude is a gateway to get you there. And you don't do it through fear. You don't do it through scarcity or doubt. You utilize gratitude as your elevator button, as your leverage to take you to that next level. It's so important.
That's so powerful. That's so powerful. And what tip would you give somebody? Let's say that somebody is listening right now. They're in this state of stress. They're in this state of fear. They're in this state of scarcity. What tip or tool or technique would you give somebody to start to embrace more of a mindset of gratitude? How does somebody take that first step to change their mindset from scarcity to abundance? And how do they start to live this life of gratitude? What would you tell that person?
A lot of people are in this state right now, and
Yeah.
I honor that. So I honor that. And, you're not alone. I think the first step is just realizing that it's not just you. It's a lot of people, right? So that should give you some comfort to know that you're not alone. There's nothing inherently wrong with you, right? Our brains are just and the information we put in our brains becomes our reality, right? It
Right.
becomes the record player that we play. So I think the first step is knowing that there's nothing wrong with you. You're not alone. Anything is changeable, and if you want it to change. So first step, knowing. Second step is realizing that it can change. That if you don't like something about your current reality, your thought process, if you feel like you're getting in your own way, if you feel stuck, that's a common word I hear a lot of people
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. So many people
They
feel
feel
that.
stuck, right? What do I do? All these things. All of this is totally normal. The first step is acknowledgement, because we can't manage what we don't measure. So we need to acknowledge that it's even a problem in the first place. And then once you've got that far, guess what? You are like 80% there. I'm
Oh my God, that's so
serious.
true. That's so true.
You're 80% there. And then
You're so right.
you just find gratitude because you have to choose it. It's something that you choose. So if, let's just say, somebody flips me off in traffic, which happened not that long ago, right? Somebody flipped me off
You're
in
like,
traffic.
I'm grateful for you flipping me off in traffic.
You know what? Again, the
Yeah.
ninja mindset move.
Right.
My 9-year-old daughter was in the back and she said, he just gave you the middle finger. I said, you know what? Let's say a prayer for this person, because clearly they're in a state of anxiety. They're in a state
Exactly.
of, right?
Exactly.
They're
Exactly.
not in a positive state. So I actually said to her, I said, I hope he has the absolute best day. I hope he wins the lottery. I hope, right? I hope he gets a promotion or whatever. So if I feel myself judging someone, I do this as well. Because this is normal, to have a brain is to have bias. So if you feel that you're judging someone or yourself, which is very common, we can judge ourselves. Tell yourself 3 things right now that you love about yourself to counteract that.
So
And
true.
do that to the next person. And you do this enough. Again, it's a compound effect.
Mm-hmm.
Just like you have interest in your bank that compounds over time, so you have positive thoughts that also compound over time. Because
Very true.
it's not enough to just think positively, you also have to remove that negativity to make way for the positivity. And again, you do this over time, it compounds just like interest in the bank. And my saying that I told my daughter when she was in kindergarten, was that complaining is like taking coins out of your piggy bank. Gratitude and thankfulness is like adding coins to your
So
piggy
true.
bank.
Yeah, it's very, very true. I love that because I think, you touched on a couple things that are super important there. I think first is the perspective of trying to put ourselves in the shoes of others, right? Which we seldomly do because, again, we're so self-absorbed with our own bullshit, right? We're like, so me. Oh my God, I need this, I need that, I'm late. We're like so into that. We're not thinking about the others. Your perspective there was great about the guy who flipped you off. It's taken me years to get there, and I've gotten much better at it. Still work in progress. But I find myself thinking the same way. When I see somebody, in Miami, and we have these, New Yorkers who have like invaded Miami ever since COVID, and you see them on their horns, and it used to really tick me off. And now I just look at that person and I go like, I wonder why they're so upset. I wonder what's going on in their life that is stressing them out. I wonder if they're having a really bad day, and why that might be happening. And so when we slow down and we question the deeper motive why people react and they do things, because most people like they feel and then they react, right? There's nothing in between. And what I've seen with like meditation and coaching and self-awareness, which you talk about as well, is instead what we need to do is we need to feel, think, empathize, and then react, right? Which is incredibly hard for most people because we're not wired that way. We're wired to respond, right? So I think that's one thing, is that perspective on putting ourselves in other people's shoes. And then, of course, being grateful for everything that's happening in our lives and not just the good thing. I think this is what people miss. I want to close before we pass to the lightning rounds. I want to close on a very important topic because I know this is one of your favorites, and it's so related to everything else that we've talked about, and it's so important for today, for people today. I mean, when you look at the number of people in this country who are living paycheck to paycheck, when you look at the number of people who have lost their jobs, when you think about what AI is going to bring us, which, the techies and the billionaires will tell us that it's going to bring productivity, the real guy in the street is going to lose his job. Like, that's just the reality. Right? AI is going to bring changes like nothing we could ever imagine. So many people right now are living in a state of scarcity. And you talk a lot about the mindset of abundance. And so while that sounds wonderful in theory, what I want to know is, in practice, how do you make that shift? How do you shift from this mindset of like, I never have enough money, I can't pay the rent, I don't have enough money to pay for school supplies for my kid, I'm never going to be able to go to vacation. So many people live in that way. How do you move to a mindset of abundance?
Yes.
What does that mean?
And this is where gratitude again comes into play, and this is all related, right? So gratitude helps rewire our brains. I mentioned that our brains are a program. So think about a hiking trail. If you go down a hiking trail that has only been walked once, it's going to have a lot of obstacles in the way. There's going to be sticks and twigs and spider webs. There's going to be all sorts of stuff. And you won't be able to run down the trail because it's not a well-worn trail. So this takes time. But if you go down a trail and a path that is well-worn, well, all of a sudden you have more room. You're expansive. You don't have to be pressed in. You can roam about freely. You don't have to worry about spider webs and cobwebs or rocks or twigs. Our neural pathways in our brain are the same way as a hiking trail. So if you think about like scarcity and fear and lack, all of these things are the well-worn trail if that's our common path, and we get used to it, and our brain says that's our default switch. You can actually switch this and change this to a different default switch. It doesn't happen instantly. It does take some rewiring and reprogramming, but our brains are naturally, we call it neuroplasticity, right? They're naturally formable and changeable. They're not static. So anything can be absolutely shifted and changed. And it's, listen to the words we say. If you're constantly saying things like worry, I'm stressed, I don't have, and it's a language of absence.
Yeah.
Your putting a spell into your life that reinforces absence and lack.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if you don't believe it yet, if you start changing even your language to language of abundance and saying, I'm so grateful that I have a roof over my head. I'm so grateful that I have healthy children. I'm so grateful that I have my health. I'm so grateful for just little things. All of a sudden, you're starting to change it and go down a different trail in your mind. And that trail now will become more well worn as opposed to the other one. So it does take time, but if you want abundance in your life, we are a mirror, not for what we want, but who we are. And we project this, and other
And who
people
we
can.
are is a function of. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine. I was just going to
No, you
say,
said we project this.
yeah, we project it. Absolutely. And if you're in a state of lack, you're going to attract other people who are in a state of lack.
So true.
If you're in a state of abundance, there's a reason why you and I connected. We're both givers. Was that a mistake? Was that a coincidence? I think it was alignment. So if you are finding yourself aligning with people who you don't want to, that don't match your future, start going within and start realizing, what is the language that I speak? What are the thought patterns that I have? And is that attractive to the person I want to become? They say, I heard something really interesting about this on a podcast a few years ago. They were talking about finding your soulmate. How do you find your soulmate? And he said, write down your 10 attributes for you want for your soulmate, and then become that person.
Hmm. It's interesting how you started off talking about words and the importance of words, right? People don't realize the weight and the power of that. And it's like when I'm working with founders and with executives, I always tell them to check their language, right? And so I was very piqued when you said that, because when we're in a scarcity mindset, that scarcity mindset often comes from what we say to ourselves. So we say to ourselves things like, I'll never have enough money, right? The car repair is always more expensive than they say it's going to be, right? My investments never pan out the way I want, right? And so when we continue to say those things to ourselves, the reality is that they become real. There's this saying which I find incredibly powerful, which is, words lead to thoughts, thoughts lead to beliefs, beliefs lead to actions, actions lead to habits, habits shape your identity, and identity defines your destiny. And so it's like, I think this is why so many people are trapped, because when you're constantly telling yourself this stuff about scarcity and you're constantly worrying about money, it produces a certain amount of energy, right? And it becomes your identity. And that becomes your destiny, which is why so many people who are poor stay poor, right? Whereas somebody who is rich, even if they go broke, they have a much better chance of becoming rich again. It's also the reason why so many people who are, but you ever seen those stories where like somebody's poor and then they win the lottery and then 2 years later they're poor again? Because they're not able to shift out of the scarcity mindset, right? So it's really fascinating because, for those people listening who don't understand neuroplasticity, right, to explain it in layman's terms, it's this idea that we can rewire our brain, right? I love your analogy of the paths, the well-worn path, right? It's like you think about it like a path, like a road. So the people who are in a scarcity mindset, they're in that mindset because they've told themselves through words so many times that they're poor, that they never have money, that life sucks, that everything's expensive, that whatever, that becomes the beaten path for them. That's the pathway in their brain is one of scarcity. And so what you're saying, if I'm understanding you correctly, is first of all, we are able to build a new path. And second, we have to then clear that path and widen that path by continually affirming positive things about abundance, right?
Yeah.
Which part of that then is tied to the visualization of the board, the visual board that we created on Google Slides or Canva, right? So we create that doc. We focus on those things every day. We have it as our screensaver, as our lock screen. We repeat these things to ourselves, and we have to check our language. It's so fascinating, Tara, because I honestly believe that we are our worst enemies. Like our mind, our brain is an amazing tool. And yet oftentimes we use it to self-destruct. You know, it's fascinating and scary at the same time. Before we close, I want to take us to our lightning round of questions. I have 3 very quick answer questions that require very, very short answers. And I ask them to every guest, and the answers are always so fun. So here they go for you. Our lightning round with Tara. Question number 1. If there was one thing that you could change in the world, what would it be?
Gosh, change the fact that people believe other people are less than them and that somehow it's okay to take advantage of others. And if we think about the history of the world, this is where all of the problems are. This is how wars started. This is how famines started. This is how slavery was started. I think the root of so much evil is the belief that there's something less about someone else and inherently better about yourself. And I would change, that would be the first thing I would change.
Okay. Question number 2. This is my favorite personally. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a good one. It might, I like this question. I don't know. I think time travel would be very cool. Very cool and very scary. So if I was like an X-Man and right, and I had like a super like
X-Woman.
X-Woman.
Yep. There you go.
For the 90s, used to love that cartoon when it was around.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, maybe
travel,
time travel. I think time travel, that would be fun.
So time travel is an awesome answer because it leads me to my 3rd and final question, which you're going to love, which is related to time travel. If you could have dinner with anyone in history, so you could time travel, who would you have dinner with?
Well, I am a Christian, so I will say Jesus. And the reason I say that is because not only did he shift the course of human history, but I feel like we're still learning from him. So if there's somebody that I feel like could be a true teacher that could really teach me, I would say him.
That's amazing. That's an amazing answer. I love that. How can people find more about you, your books, your work, your podcast? You run a Christian women's retreat. Where can people get information about you?
Absolutely. So again, my name is Tara LaFon Gooch. Feel free to look me up and connect. I'm on every social media platform. My personal website is taralafongooch.com, and my company website is Best Branding Solutions. So bestbranding.solutions.
Awesome. So awesome to have you on the show. So thankful, so grateful for having you in my life. You have been amazing. You're like this little spark of positive energy that always brings like a lot of good things to me. So it's always cool to connect. And that was it, folks. That was Tara LaFon Gooch, speaker, author, coach, the voice behind Grasp Confidence podcast. And, I think her journey is a reminder that confidence is really not about being the loudest person in the room. It's about being grounded in who you are, being grounded in that state of abundance that we talked about. So if this conversation gave you something to think about, please, share it with somebody who needs this. There's a lot of people hurting out there, a lot of people who need help, people who need an extra push, people who need to shift that mindset from one of scarcity to abundance. And if you want more, you've got all Tara's socials. Check out her website, check out her amazing podcast, and check out her latest book, Talk Your Way to the Top, available on all major online and offline retailers. Tara, it's been amazing. Wish you all the best. Nothing but abundance, nothing but awesomeness. We will stay in touch, and we will see you folks on the next episode of Mork Unfiltered.